Good morning. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm very excited to see you, and I'm so glad that we at Alverno College could host this important event. We're honored to have you here, and again, so very happy to host an event of this type. It is my hope that your time and activities today will help you on your journey of servant leadership. I believe it's a journey worth taking. As I was reflecting on this event today, I thought of a couple of things about my own journey. One was several years ago, like 2018-19, when one of our employees at Girl Scouts of Wisconsin Southeast, where I was previously, asked whether or not we could have a speaker on servant leadership. And knew about the concept, but I had never had any formal training or any activities related to it. I thought it was a great idea. We invited a speaker to join us. That speaker, during the time that she was with us, made an indelible mark on the staff there. And there were about 100 staff there. As people dispersed for lunch or whichever break we had, many of them commented on the message and how great the message was. I think that for everyone that was there, the message resonated, and it stems from something that Robert Greenleaf said about the growth and well-being of people and the communities to which they belong. That really resonated with our staff. After the meeting, we always do an evaluation that we send out to see, how things were and to have some instruction for the next meeting that we have. That session and that speaker scored the highest of any meeting that we had ever had. I thought it was very successful and very much a learning opportunity for me. The other thing I thought of was that your theme today is building community for a common, or for the common ground, or for the common good, excuse me. I recently had the opportunity to welcome our own Alverno community on October 4th. We had something called Community Day. And this year, our theme was Community Building Day. And I spoke very much about the need to develop community, or to build community, particularly because it's helpful, of course, when you want to achieve a goal, but also it's imperative to have someone around you when you encounter obstacles. And that when you build a community, you're able to weather those storms and weather those obstacles and navigate them more effectively when you have someone with you who has a common goal. So I thought about that. And then finally, I'm reading a book. Okay, that's just a little bit of a lie. I don't read as much as I would love to, but I listen. There's this thing called Audible, so I love that, and I'm doing that fairly frequently. And the book that I am listening to, if you want to be accurate, is called Drive. It's by the author Daniel Pink, and he has a hypothesis that the world is functioning more not being motivated by carrots and sticks, or not being motivated by if then propositions. If employee, you do this, then you'll get that. Instead, they're motivated by something he calls the third drive. In his supposition, he talks about that drive being motivated by, among some other things, purpose and finding a meaning in your life. I love the book. It's great. I'm not done with it yet. I'll check back in when I'm done, to let you know if he was correct. But the whole message around the book is that we are more fulfilled and we achieve more when we find purpose in the work that we're doing. So I want to say to you this morning, I really hope that today you find you have a great message, you have great messengers, and that you find purpose and meaning in the activities that you're doing today, and they influence the journey that you're on with regard to servant leadership. So thank you so much for coming to Alverno. I hope you enjoy the day. I have arranged for it to be 60 degrees a little bit later. So I know you're going to have a good time inside and out. Thank you so much for coming.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for the invitation to be here today. I'm really excited, a little nervous, but mostly excited. Um, Whenever I speak with groups, as Deanna said, I work at the STEM Center. I love to share things through a hands-on manner. So I hope everyone might be open to trying something maybe a little different. At your tables, you have these packets. And I'm only going to take a minute of your time, quite literally. But I would like to do what's called a flower pot challenge. So you have a brown paper bag. That is for waste. I didn't want to create a mess. But the paper and mailing labels are like your tape and paper materials to work with. And there should be enough for everyone at each table. Otherwise, you can swipe from a partner table. But your challenge is to build me a flower pot. You'll have a minute to do it. There's no rules, just that you use the paper and the mailing labels. If you're a very points driven person, no one's keeping track, but you can be competitive at your table. The pot itself is 15 points. Each leaf you attach is 15 points, and a flower and stem is 55. So that is all the instruction I'm going to give. There really are no rules, but your challenge is to create a flower pot with the paper and mailing labels at your table. Go ahead and get started. I'll be back in a minute. And you can tear, you can rip. Got about 30 seconds left. No pressure. Master Chef style, hands up. Your time is up. I see a lot of really great flower pots. And I have to say, what's really exciting is I saw a lot of people working together. When I've run this activity with other groups, a lot of people choose to work independently. And I really enjoyed watching people work together as a table. So this type of an activity is called an instant challenge. I can't take credit for it. Destination Imagination comes up with them, which is a wonderful program that I will not go into. That would be my full 10 minutes. Most of the time, people have 5 to 10 minutes to do these challenges. So you did like the power hour version. Thanks for trying it out. You're welcome to keep the materials if you want to keep designing after today. This has been very heavily adapted, and full credit goes to Johnny Wells, who introduced this. But I love using instant challenges at the STEM Center and in this context because there's a lot of cool things you cover in it. Some of you probably thought about critical thinking skills, creative problem solving, teamwork, and listening. A lot of times when we do these challenges, there's a lot of nuance and complexity that can go into ones that are designed for longer periods of time. But it's easy to lose sight of the challenge we were asked. In this example, the challenge was to build a flower pot. If you focused on the flower first or the stem, that's great. It's icing on the cake. But the real challenge was building a flower pot. And I was reflecting on building community, and listening kind of came to me as like, that's the thing that's been inseparable from all the different parts of my leadership experience. When I started my career, I started in what was called a leadership development program, or LDP program. And the idea was that new engineers would spend a year, over 3 years, you do 3 one-year rotations at different parts of the company. And my first rotation was as a manufacturing engineer at a plant in St. Louis, Missouri. And my task was to oversee a manufacturing floor that had 40 big presses that pressed out different metal pieces for fuses, and a plating line. To that point in my career, I'd only ever worked in an architectural office. As a lot of people can imagine, an office and a manufacturing floor share very few similarities other than there are human beings there. And as I was being introduced to people on the first day, one of the press operators pulled me aside and said, "I hope you don't take this the wrong way, but we see you people, the LDPs, come in every year with really big, bright ideas. You share your idea, you leave, somebody else comes in and has a new idea. And just don't feel bad if people are really resistant to what you have to say. Nice to meet you." And then they left. And I am a huge people pleaser. I get the greatest joy from helping others, but I also feel the greatest sense of personal disappointment and failure when I let people down. And in that moment, I felt terrible. I was like, I've already let everyone down just by being here. I haven't even done anything short of saying hi. And I went back to my desk and I thought to myself, I'm here for a year, whether I like it or not. I mean, I guess I could quit, but that wasn't really one of the options I considered at the time. What am I going to do? I feel like I've already failed. I have a crippling sense of imposter syndrome. I've never worked in manufacturing, and now I need to be like in charge of this plant floor. And I'm just really nervous and kind of scared to be here. And I wish what I did next came from like, I learned servant leadership in college and I reflected back upon that, or a mentor gave me guidance. But it was totally fear driven. I was like, if I don't open my mouth, no one will know that I have no clue what's going on. So I'm just going to listen as much as possible. And so I asked different plant operators, press operators, would it be okay if I just sat and watched you work so I can learn a little bit more about what you do? Because I don't know what you're doing. It's not a time study. I'm not analyzing your workflow. I really just want to watch. And as you might imagine, not a ton of people were open to it because I was management. But a couple of people I'm so thankful said, that's fine, pop a squat, let's hang out. And if you've worked on a manufacturing floor or seen it or YouTube it, there's moments of kind of chaos and transition, but there's also a lot of points where you're sitting and just kind of monitoring things. And those turned into really good moments to chat. I got to know people a lot better. People were really open to talking about their children, their grandchildren, what they're up to that weekend. But a lot of people also shared um, challenges that I could help with. Like, I hate running this part. It generates so much scrap and it's a lot to manage. Or at this part of the day, I'm bent over for a long period of time and it really hurts my back. And that's what I was there for. So I was super psyched. I'm like, okay, I'm getting to know people and I have a better idea of what I can do to help them. And as an engineer, those of you who might be in engineering, we're equipped with a lot of different tools to solve problems. And when I was in college, we were taught the ways to do it. And a lot of times people didn't factor into that. As a design engineer, it was really easy to lose sight of the people who might have built what I was designing or who might be the people working on that part. And I learned how important it was to take those people into using those tools, which I think made me a better engineer and a better teammate. I'm not going to say at the end of that year that people were like in tears that I was leaving. I think there was mixed emotions, but I do think we built a community. I think in a community, people aren't always going to like you, but I did feel like everybody trusted me. They knew when I came to them, I was coming from a place of trying to help and trying to serve, and I didn't always get it right, but I had the best of intentions, and I'd like to think everyone thought that. A few years later, I went to the Milwaukee School of Engineering to start up a STEM program. And this time, still a little scared, still some imposter syndrome. Nobody told me that they didn't want my ideas, though, so that was an improvement. But this time I knew what to do. I knew to listen, and I had an intentionality behind it versus kind of stumbling upon it and learning that it's a servant leadership principle, which has always really resonated with me. And I'm new to higher ed. I'm coming out of engineering. I don't really know what K-12 schools are like. So it was really a pleasure to listen, to hear what people were looking for in the community. And I'm super biased, but I think the STEM Center has been really emblematic of what it looks like to build something for the community and with the community. And I'm really proud of our team because I think they always are listening to what the community needs and how we can serve. Another big takeaway I've had with listening is there are times when I'm tasked with solving a problem and I lose sight of the flower pot, so to speak. Like I really grasp onto the flowers and stems, like the big things I can do to make an impact. And listening is that opportunity to make sure I'm aligned and I know what's actually being asked of me. Also, if you're freaking out and you need more time, listening is a great way to give yourself some more time to process things. It's really, talking to people, of course, is like a natural way I think about it. But reading what people have written about something you're trying to solve, user feedback stories, and giving that opportunity to ground yourself again and what is the flower pot that I'm trying to build. So thank you for listening to me for 10 minutes and for your time. And thank you again for having me here today.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for the introduction, Deanna. If you have engaged with me or worked with me at all, you may know that I'm a J when it comes to our Myers-Briggs typology. And that means that for the most part, not always, but I can be really organized and structured and sometimes black and white. And so as the founding principal of an elementary school, 24 years old, I was kind of a stickler with the rules when it came to my students and my staff members and the policies and the procedures that we had to focus on. I can be honest and say that my first year was not necessarily as great as I wanted it to be. There were a lot of learning curves within there, but we're going to fast forward a decade, little more than a decade, and I receive a phone call from an individual, and she says, Keisha, I would love if you could come and provide some professional development for us. And this person was a new hire, a teacher that I hired, who has now transitioned into the Dean of Instruction role at the school that I was the founding principal of. And for me, it really resonates that building a community is more than just one particular incident. It's the many actions and words that you say to individuals that allows that community to be built, for that relationship to be there, and for someone to want to reach out to you years later, even though you were the stickler boss that you were in the beginning, but she stayed with me long enough to change. And I believe that's what servant leadership is. You take a moment back and you reflect, what can I do differently? And over the course of the years, I had an opportunity to do that. So I want to share a few things with you before we dive in. I've had an opportunity, as Deanna shared, to work in a variety of backgrounds. Started off with City Year as their training project leader. I was a teacher. I was an instructional coach at the founding year of a school. And then I transitioned to being the founding principal of an elementary school on Milwaukee's Northwest Side. Loved it, but after that, I transitioned to higher ed and actually had an opportunity to work with Deanna and Liz at MSOE as the director of the MBA EL program. And then shifted gears a little bit. I'm now in healthcare with Advocate Aurora Health and leadership development. I also have my own coaching and consulting business, and I'm a real estate agent as well. So wearing many hats, as Deanna stated. But with all of that in mind, I want you to know that leadership is not a title. It is a way of thinking. So I'm sorry if there are some other high leaders in the room, but we've come here to learn more about what servant leadership is. So your title doesn't matter. It really is how you think and therefore how you behave. So I want to share some small moments with you, and we're going to dive deeper into that principalship role because for me, that was the most impactful time in leadership that I had an opportunity to be a servant to those around me. I wanted to pull out some of the principles of servant leadership that we talk about. There are 10 of them, and there are 4 primary ones that stood out to me as we're going to discuss today. Listening, empathy, awareness, and commitment to growth. And for me, all 4 of those align with emotionally intelligent leadership. And so if you are emotionally intelligent, you will have a tremendous impact on your team, on your colleagues, on the greater community, but you will then see yourself building a community. Emotional intelligence, if you look at Daniel Goleman's work, listening, empathy, and self-awareness are already called out. And then I just said social skills for the commitment to growth for other people. So you can couple them into those categories. But let's dive in a little bit. So let's talk about listening. So my staff once told me, Keisha, you're a robot. Now, no, you're not staring at a robot. You're looking at a living, breathing human being with a heart and a mind. But that's what they told me. And it stemmed from them predicting the responses that I would share with them. And I thought it was a good thing to have some predictability. You know how I'm going to respond. You know what I expect. But when I took a step back and realized, what are they really trying to say to me? It was that my responses were not genuine and authentic. That I was not truly listening to what it was that they were saying, but I already had my response ready to provide to them. So what could I do differently? I took an opportunity and I said, we're going to do less walk and talks. I don't know about you, but in busy environments, I'm like, hey, let's walk and talk and have this meeting. Let's not do that. Let me be able to sit down and look at you eye to eye and really hear what you're saying. I wanted to hear from them, what could I do differently? I opened up our evaluations, which we have 4 times a year, and said, instead of me just evaluating you, you evaluate me. What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? What do I need to stop, start, and continue doing to be the best leader for you? And then with that in mind, I themed it. And I brought it back to the staff. Here are the themes that I'm pulling out from the feedback that you've provided, and here's what I'm committing to do. Letting them know that I'm listening to them and will then make a change based upon what they've shared. Let's dive into empathy, another principle that has been shared. Everyone wants to feel like they are accepted and recognized. And by all means, we were big on shout outs and sharing that with our team and recognizing them for things. But when it came to attendance, now that was one thing I was a stickler on. But I had a staff member who was habitually late. And so I wanted to assume best intent, but I sat down with her and I said, hey, what's going on? And she shared with me that she was in a physically abusive relationship and that she was staying with someone else and coming late to work to alter her schedule because her partner knew what time and where she would be. And by no means did I expect to hear that from her. But in the moment, we had to pivot. I had to listen and I had to be empathetic for what was happening, and together we created an action plan, resources, helping her figure out who to go to, what it is that she could do to rectify the situation that was happening in her life. Now, it was hard, but she worked through it. And as leaders, we have to moccasin, put ourselves in our teammates, in our friends, in our colleagues' shoes. But one thing that I had to learn was that as we're sliding in those shoes and we're walking a mile in their shoes, we also have to remember to step back and take those shoes off. because we can often hold on to everyone else's hurt, pain, lives, and that becomes way too much for us to handle. And that's when burnout comes in leadership. So we have to be able to moccasin, but then take those shoes back off. The next one that I want to talk to you about is awareness. Now, as leaders, and remember, leadership is not a title, it's a way of thinking. So I don't care what your role is, you're a leader. So you are mirroring for others the behavior that you want to see by your engagement. That is what we do as leaders. And at one particular time, I was leaving the building and some incidents occurred, and I came back and my staff was like, well, Ms. Johnny's, when this happened, we said, what would Keisha do? And at first it was amusing. I'm like, okay, great. Yes, you have my mindset. You're thinking about what would I do? But then the 24-year-old who had to learn and develop and grow and understand and gain confidence and know that there are some insecurities in areas that I just don't know some things. And I have to be self-aware enough to say, I don't have all the answers. I hired you for the skill sets that you bring to the table, and I want you to answer, what would you do? Not what would Keisha do, because what you would do may be completely different and may be the best decision for our students, for our staff, for our community. And so we had to shift our mindset. And I had to shift my mindset and understanding what I brought to the table wasn't all that my team needed. But collectively, that's how we're going to build in this community that we have. I don't have all the answers. And so I want to be transparent with you that you don't either. And that's okay. That's okay. We're going to talk about commitment to growth. Now, if you've ever taken StrengthsFinder, achievement is like number one for me. And so I love to grow. I want to figure out what's next, and I want the same for my staff. I had a food service personnel. She started with me, young lady, and I said, where do you want to be in 5 years? This is not going to be your role in 5 years. You can start and we can work together now, but where do you want to be? And I guarantee she stayed with me for maybe 3 years, and then we transitioned her somewhere else. But I want the best for you because you bring so much value to the community, to our team, that as leaders, sometimes we stifle the growth that people can have because we want them to stay with us. You're so great that I want you here. But if we let them spread their wings and fly, imagine the impact that they would have, not just in our environment or in our sector, but for the greater good of our entire community. With my staff members, we had stretch goals. Outside of what you do on your day-to-day basis, what else would you like to grow in? How can I support you? We had transparent conversations with staff members that I knew weren't going to stay with me. They shared with me, I'm going to apply for a different position or go to this other organization next year. Thank you for letting me know, one, so I can hire for that position as it comes up. But two, what can I do to support you? Have you applied? Are you interviewing? Do you need a letter of recommendation? Those were ways that I was able to engage and have staff members who left my school still want to engage with me, still be able to build community, still be able to say, hey, I love you. This is more than just the work that we do and the results that we need from people, but the relationships that we build. Last but not least, building community, that's what we're here for. And as you've seen on every slide, it's just pictures of my school and pictures with my staff members. I couldn't talk about them without showing you them. But each and every action that we take impacts our larger community, whether it's our students, our families, the Granville community, which our school was in, or the larger nation, because there were people who left and moved and went to different states, went to different countries. You're impacting more than just the person that's sitting next to you when you are being loving, kind, and nice, when you are listening, when you are sharing. You have a much larger impact than what you actually think. My last year as a principal, my gym teacher, retired from his career, asked me a question and said something to me that I will never forget. And he's like, Ms. Johnny's, what are you doing? It was a Friday. Trash needed to be taken out. I took the trash out and I'm washing the can out because it was dirty. And I'm like, I'm just taking the trash out. And he's like, we will not find anyone like you. And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, most leaders won't do what you do, how you do it. And if you think about that term, it's stuck with me forever because leadership is not I have a title and I'm too good to do anything. But leadership is how can I support you? Now, by all means, there was a conversation after for the person who was supposed to take the trash out and accountability for that. But at the end of the day, I want to leave it better than I found it. And so I'm not going to go home for the weekend and leave the trash sitting here. That's not what we're going to do. So I say all of that to say you play a vital role in building our community. I learned so many lessons in my first couple of years as a principal, and struggled to get to where I was in leadership. Daily in the grind, learning as a leader, gaining feedback from individuals, being open and willing to listen on how I could do things differently. And that's why I started the coaching consultant, so that other leaders would not have to struggle as I did. And we can close the gap and you can recognize your blind spots so that you can lead effectively. Relationships, I touched on earlier, are so key and important. I would have never had an opportunity to be able to provide professional development for a school that I left years ago without building relationships with the staff that I had and the community that I had. So if it's not just getting a number or an email address from someone in the room that you have not met before, build a relationship today because you don't know the community that you will impact. Thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much for having me here. And it's been a pleasure to listen to Liz and Keisha and their stories. And it's a hard act to follow. But I'm going to talk today, I am the leader of an organization, but I'm not really going to talk about that aspect of my leadership. I'm going to talk more about community, being out in the community and how to get involved. And I hope that after you see what I talk about, that it can help some of you help solve the problems that are so ingrained in our society today. And I really think that we can all, if we all work together, we can do that. So it's called Building a House by Building a Community, and I hope you'll see why. So a little bit about myself. I was born in Pewaukee. I moved to Milwaukee at the age of 9 in 1966. I lived on the east side as a young man, went to Maryland Avenue Grade School, Marquette High, UWM, and Madison. So other than living in Chicago for a few years, about 3 years, I've really lived in Milwaukee my whole life. And I'm very committed to making making Milwaukee a better place. And we'll talk about that. So I've been a consulting engineer, a civil engineer, and I've been the president of my current company since 2012. And one thing you got to know about me, in addition to being very interested in the community, I like to see things get built. That's just my nature. That's the industry I'm in. I've wanted that since I was a young man. So I like to see bricks and mortar and things get built. So I have been involved, as I said, in civil engineering, and as part of, I view civil engineering, and I think you probably all view your professions as very noble professions, how we help people, so many things that people don't think about when they turn on the water, or they flip the electric switch, or they get in their car and they drive. These were all something that civil engineers had and civil engineers is really serving the community. So I always thought of myself as serving the community by virtue just of the profession I had chosen. Luckily, within that profession at my company, Grafe, there was a long history of working in the community was important. It was encouraged. That was part of the way that I was brought up into industry. It was not something that you necessarily had to do on your spare time. And it was an important thing that we live in this community, we work in this community, we get things from the community, but you had to give back. And that's been part of our culture since I started there, and we continue to have that kind of culture. But I'll tell you a story that really got me more involved. So this picture is of what became Miller Park or Ampam Field under construction in County Stadium. And what the story I'm going to tell is probably about 10 years earlier than this, believe it or not. But there was a lot of talk about building a new stadium, really back to the early 90s. And there was a lot of fight. If those of you who are old enough and remember the fight that it took to get this stadium built, and there was a lot of negativism. And at that time, I thought, you know, I'm an engineer. I like to build things. Nobody here wants to do anything. You know, we want to build the stadium, but nobody really is, is interested in doing anything. Maybe I should move somewhere where people are more open to building things and making progress in the city. And they're not always just thinking about the 50 or 60 reasons why you shouldn't do something, but the one reason why you should do something. So I really considered strongly moving. And I thought about that and I thought, well, if you're somewhere that you are and you don't like the way it is, you have three choices. And one of them is to move. And I don't think that's a bad idea. I've had brothers and sisters who've left the area or friends, and you can move and go someplace else where you like it better. One of them is to stay there and complain about it. So you can do that, and that's what most people do. They stay there and they moan about it, and how come things aren't better? Why don't the politicians do a better job? And the third thing is you can stay there and try to make it better. So I think only the first and the third thing make any choice. You can leave or you can stay there and try and make it better. It's no make any sense. It makes no sense to stay there and just complain about it. But unfortunately, that's what a lot of people do. So I decided at that time, rather than leave, I was going to stay here and try and make things better. So I really tried to commit myself to that. But I had a couple issues in that I thought, because I was thinking more of this kind of transformational change that I had to be a part of. And part of the problem was I'm not rich. I can't give somebody $90 million to build a Bradley Center. I'm not well known. Why would anybody listen to me? I'm not politically astute, so I'm not sure how I'm going to do. And plus, with my engineering background, people tended to think, and there may be some truth to that, I didn't necessarily possess the people skills, or I looked at things in a way that wasn't necessarily good for, these really big thinking. So, I had that. I'm wondering, well, how am I going to get beyond these problems? And the good thing about that was my engineering discipline taught me when I learned that if you have some huge problem, the way you solve it is you take that huge problem, you break it into a bunch of smaller problems, and you solve those smaller problems, and you put it back together, and you can solve the huge problem. So I said, well, I'm not going to be any of those things overnight, so I can't do that. But then what I started to do is I decided, I realized that there's this kind of house model, and people always think that change is transformational. That's what they remember. AmFam Field was built. That's a big transformation. Leaders do things that are very have a huge effect. Mahatma Gandhi or Martin Luther King or somebody like that. But really, I think most change, even though we love the transformational change, I think most change is incremental. So I realized that, I view a community as a house that we're building, and a house is never finished, and you're always building a house. And there are some people that build a lot of the house. I mentioned like Abraham Lincoln, Martin Luther King, Mahatma Gandhi. They build a whole wing of the house, but most of us aren't able to do that, but we're able to do something. So when you're building a house, you have a roofer, you have a carpenter, you have the painter, you have someone installing the windows. So maybe all I can do is put up one wall of this house, or maybe I can just shingle one side of the house. But if I do that and everybody else does that, then the change happens over time. So I think a lot of people don't get involved in trying to make the community better because they don't know, they view that I have to make a transformational change. And really you can do this, everybody can do this incremental change. Everybody in this room can help with the incremental change. And I think, and I've seen, I'm a little bit older than Liz and Keisha, and I have seen over time the benefits of some of this incremental change. So over time, I've become involved with a large number of groups. You see them, some of them there. In most of these groups, I've served either as a chair or a member of the executive committee at some point or another, and been involved. And I wasn't, I am a CEO, so that helps me, but most of the people on the board are not. And I don't think anybody would say, if you ask somebody, well, who's making change in this community, that my name would particularly come up. But I do believe, and I'm proud of this, that within each of those groups that are listed there, I've been involved in things that have actually had a positive effect on this community. I didn't do it by myself. I did it with other board members, and together we did things in every single one of those that had a positive impact on this community. So that's really what I'm here to talk about today. We can all have a positive impact if we just think of ourselves. I'm the bricklayer. I'm just out there laying bricks every day. And, we'll see. I think I have a lot of runway left. We'll see when I get to the end how much of the house that I built But I know that pushes the needle forward. And everybody would do this if they would say, well, I'm not going to complain about it. I'm going to do something about this. And they would try to do it in this small incremental manner, whether it's volunteering on a neighborhood organization, a board like this, or there's a million different ways to do it. I think that's a very, very important way to think about things. So at the end of the day, AmFam Millard Park did get built. I had nothing to do with it, but I was glad to see it happen. Uh, uh, but I continue to try to build physical things in my day job, but all of the time I'm trying to build a better community. And I think if you just take that simple thing of I don't have to tackle this whole big problem by myself, I don't have to be transformational. If you are a transformational leader, by all means, go for it. If you say I can't wait that long, John, that's great. But most of us are not. And for those of us who are not, you can still have a very positive impact if you're just willing to to get started, to get out there, and to be part of a group that's trying to make this community better. So I want to thank you. And I'm really very pleased to be here today, and I'm looking forward to our roundtable discussion. So thank you very much.
When you're a J and you're so busy, what does the boss do to make sure that you're going in the right direction? What should the boss do?
And I think and I would hope that what they would do is to ensure that all the things that I'm engaged in align with my purpose and the skill sets that I have. I think that we all have value through the various aspects of work that we do. Some of us are phenomenal in writing, or you have a different trade, whatever that may be. But then there are also things that we do that just bring us great value and purpose to our lives. And so hopefully that individual knows who I am and is allowing me to direct that in the right way. And by the way, I do feel like everything that I'm doing aligns with my purpose. I'm an educator at heart. So no matter what I'm from real estate to my current position, it's all about educating others.
What if you come from a community that has lost hope and but you see the skill sets that are there in the community? How do you bring them in, draw them in to encourage and keep them going?
So I went to school in Flint, Michigan. I moved from rural Wisconsin and was a college student right before the water crisis hit, which is someone who lived in a house that had the lead pipes. That was a fun alumni letter to get. But I got my start in STEM outreach by doing a Girl Scout STEM day in that community. And in my head, I was like, oh, who wouldn't want to come to this? And the first year was successful, but what we found in talking to the community is approaching STEM from a hands-on way and emphasizing that it would be different, that everyone was welcome. You didn't need any kind of skill set, removing transportation barriers, offering to fund busing, and waiving transportation fees were big. But in talking to girls there, a lot of them said that were from the community, they came from all over southeastern Michigan, was they just wanted people to believe in them and tell them that I think you should do this. I think you're capable of doing this. And a lot of those girls said in their schools, they just weren't getting that from people. They were more people telling them they couldn't do something than they could, which is hard to hear. I'm sure Keisha feels the same. I would feel very heartbroken to hear someone's in a school like that. So in that community, that was just a small piece. But we found by just trying to make sure everyone felt like no matter where you're coming from, you can be a part of this and be here, and being the person to say, I believe that you can do this, made a big difference for that very small subsection of that community.
Yeah, if I could answer that, I think the essence of being a leader really is how do you motivate people to work towards a common goal? I mean, that's what it is at the end of the day. So motivating people is a challenge, particularly when they've lost hope. And I think you have to be authentic. You have to not be afraid to say, I think this is important, and let people laugh at you and say, oh, that'll never happen. You know, that can't happen here. So it's hard. It's hard with groups either in work or out in the community when people just say it's a hopeless. But I always go down to my engineering background and say, if we just break this down, what can we solve? Let's just break this down and find a small problem that we can, or maybe we can't solve this big problem, but let's find a problem we can solve. And then let's see if we can work towards that. I guess that's my only advice.
As I was thinking through the question that you asked, I go back to why have they lost hope? Why don't they want to be involved? And we may not be able to answer all of it, but what initially comes to mind is not being heard is something that I hear a lot from individuals, not feeling like they're seen. And so we held a community roundtable in the Granville area just to hear what problems are rising that we may know of or may not know of. What would they like seen differently? How can we contribute to that? And by all means, that small thing led us to holding a community event where there were so many people who came out, but we were then able to tap into, you have this business that you haven't even told us about? Why not? And so we were able to then pull from them. But I think there has to be an initial, what's your reasoning behind not wanting to be involved or feeling like your hope is lost? And then hitting it at the root of what that is.
Keisha, is it?
Yes.
Keisha, I your analogy of we need to moccasin up, but then take the moccasins off resonated with me. Can you elaborate a little bit more? And that really goes for all of you.
Absolutely. So my time in City Year, when I served, it's a nonprofit organization, but it really is an AmeriCorps program, was all about servant leadership. And one of our founding stories, it talks about moccasin and being empathetic for others that are around you. You may not have ever experienced what they're going through, but you have to take a moment to step into their life. What does it look like, feel like, sound like to be in the position that they're in? And then how do you respond now knowing that? Because we can be, and I'll talk about Keisha. Let me not talk about you all. I can be tunnel vision on what's happening with me and forget the impact of my response on others. And so if I'm able to moccasin, feel what they're feeling, see what they're seeing, I can respond in a more empathetic way that lets them know I may not have ever experienced this, but I'm here with you. I hear what you're saying and I'm here to support you. Whether you want me to listen, whether you want me to take action, I'm here. And as a principal, there are stories that I could tell. I mean, even in other leadership positions, but there's something that's happening in everyone's life. We're all human. It's not all sunshine and roses every day. But as a leader, people are coming to you with the issues, whether it's a student, whether it's a parent, whether it's a staff member or a colleague. And so sometimes you can feel overwhelmed by the amount of turmoil that's occurring in people's lives that you get so down because you can't answer everyone's problems, but they're coming to you with it. And at the end of the day, I had to be able to shed that. I understand it. I'm going to respond to you in the moment with what I can give you, but I can't let that emotionally impact me every day because then I'm not at my healthiest and my best for you. Yeah.
John, what do you do to ensure that you're taking care of yourself just like Keisha is?
That's a big deal. I'm fortunate that my personality is fairly easygoing, so it's hard I don't upset easily. I'm a generally positive guy. I live in my own little bubble where I think everybody loves me, and I'm the center of the universe. So I've always had that. I think high self-esteem is something that's very important, honestly, in getting through the day when times are tough. But you have to take time. It's just you have to take time to get rest. You have to try to exercise. The problems can seem overwhelming, but sometimes you just have to put them aside and do something else, and the solution will come to you. So it is hard. Everybody wants to be the boss, and there's a lot of great perks to it, but the hard part, that is the hard part, is all the responsibility that you feel and all the issues that come. But you'll often find when people come and talk to you, they aren't really looking for a solution. They just want to talk and process the issue by telling you, so they'll often know the solution. But it is probably the biggest challenge of being a leader, is how do you not let it overwhelm you and just plow you under.
Yeah, a lot of that resonates with me too. When I was starting my career, especially when I started moving into leadership positions, I would always feel like I had to deal with things that day. Like if an email came in or a project came up, I'm like, okay, I need to deal with this before I go home. And suddenly you're stuck in the office and it's 7 or 8 at night. And I've found, I know this isn't true for every field, but the fields I've been in, everything's always there the next day when I get back, and it still has the same importance or urgency. And so whether I stay till 8 p.m. and get something out that someone won't look at till tomorrow, or I wait, go home, kind of take a break, process it, and come back the next morning, I found that everything's still there, and I haven't had any bad things happen since I started shutting my computer off at 5 p.m. or whatever time. And I think secondary to that is, it's, as John kind of said, it's really easy to get overwhelmed. And I found if my team is really happy and feels like they're supported, suddenly things are less stressful for me because we're all sharing that load and everyone feels like they're a part of it. And having that open door that people can either vent and externally process what they're going through, or know that we can share the load, because sometimes I feel like I have to do everything myself and I don't. I have a lot of wonderful people around me, and remembering to share, I think, is a form of self-care.
One more thing I want to add to that, but it's a bit of a platitude because I don't always follow it myself, but I try to, which is you cannot doubt yourself. Everybody else in the world is going to doubt you. So if you doubt yourself, you know, you're gone. If you're not going to cut it, somebody will come by and they'll pull you off the stage. But if you're going to go and work this, you have to have faith in yourself. And once you start doubting yourself, then that's when you lose it. So you just have to plow ahead and say, you know, I know this is tough, but I have faith in myself. And no matter what anybody else says, I'm just not going to let that get to me. And I know that's really, really hard, but it's something I try to live by. And I think it's really important.
I also serve as president at Wisconsin Lutheran College, and there's a lot of people just writing off this generation of young people, college students. I don't see it. I don't buy it at all. But what advice would you give to a 22-year-old self, knowing what you've done and the moccasins that you've walked in? You know, these aren't easy moments. To be a college graduate and to head into the world, and I would love your thoughts on that from your perspective of where you are now.
I can start off and say trust the process. When I graduated from undergrad, I went directly into AmeriCorps, making $11,000 a year on food stamps, and did not know exactly what I wanted to do, but I was serving and I was happy. I didn't know where it would lead to. I had no clue where I would be in my life now, but trusting the process and allowing opportunities to open. And they opened because of my commitment and dedication to the work that I was doing. So whatever you do, give it your all and trust the process. Now, you still need to be strategic and apply for things, but by all means, doors just opened for me that I couldn't have even imagined because of dedication and work ethic. So I'll leave it at that.
I see younger people who are doing a great job out there, and you know, regardless of what you think of them, the world is theirs, and they have to shape it to the way they want it to be. And so I think if you're 22 or 42 or 62, you can be out there making a difference in the community. And the earlier you get started, you'll learn a lot more and you'll do a lot more. So I would just say don't wait to get started. Don't think I'm too young, nobody's ever going to listen to me or things like that. Just go out there and find something that you're passionate about and get involved.
When I think back to being a 22-year-old student, and I work with a lot of students, and sometimes I feel like I'm not that far removed, and then I do the math, and I am. But I had such a lack of self-confidence, and I just figured at some point I would figure it out, and that confidence would come, that I would get to a role, and I would know a lot, and I don't know if I expected someone to be like, Liz, you've made it, you get it, you know everything, you can be confident now. And I don't know if that feeling ever comes. I think there's always something new to learn. There's always other people to learn from. And I think accepting that you won't know everything at probably any point, to the exclusion of maybe any PhDs in the room who like really know everything about what your PhD was in. And just leaning into it. And sometimes it's okay to be quiet and take a moment to go freakishly Google a bunch of stuff about what you heard in a meeting and had no idea about, and that's okay.
I was wondering what you think about the state of servant leadership these days. as you were telling your story about the three things you could do, move, complain, or do something, there seems like we're in a world where there's a lot of complaining, but that may just be because of the 24-hour news cycle and they got to talk about the complaining stuff. So
That is, I don't think a lot of times people really realize how silly that is. But, you know, and people feel like, you know, there's powerful forces that are working against them. And they may say, John, that's a real naive thing you just did there. You know, what's that going to do? But I think it's too bad that there's not. I think things like this are good. We need to have more positive messages out there in the community. And more people have to declare that, you know, I'm out here working for good, and I don't care if you think, you know, there's no chance, you know, I'm going to do it. So I do think our society has become, has succumbed to too much complaining and not enough rolling up your sleeves and doing the job. But that doesn't mean there aren't a lot of people out there that are doing that. So, and that doesn't mean that we can't all in this room do that.
Oh, the three things John listed, it's really easy to complain. It's harder to even like today, take 2 hours out of your day and learn more about servant leadership. This is candidly my first servant leadership, like formal experience. And we were talking earlier, Dick's like, well, why haven't you been to one? I'm like, I don't know. There's always just kind of been something else going on. I think it's hard to make things a priority until someone shows you the importance of it and you experience it. And I think at MSOE, I hear about it all the time. But when I was in industry, I don't think I ever had heard of servant leadership. And I wouldn't have known it was something you could pick to do and embody. So getting the word out more, kind of like John shared, I think is helpful.
Two things come to mind when I thought about your question. The first is when I think about the community overall and the opportunity to serve on the board of City of Milwaukee, the young people that I see that are so eager to do what I did years ago and get paid minimally to serve in schools still gives me hope that you can do this and you want to serve, you want to engage with others, you want to listen for minimal money is great to hear because we can do this and we get paid for it in our lives as leaders. The second thing is thinking about more business or organizations and corporations. I think servant leadership, being in the leadership department for healthcare, it may not be a coined term that we're using all of the time, but aspects of servant leadership is weaved into the things that we do or the programs that we're providing for development for our leaders, even our teammates. And so even though you may not call it out as servant leadership, I absolutely believe that there is still aspects woven into the work that we're doing to develop the individuals corporately and in nonprofit organizations.
And I do want to add one more thing. I know I already talked on this, and this doesn't directly relate to the question, but I like to use analogies, and the analogy that I use is you can sit in a locker room and you can plan the game. So a lot of people sit in the locker room and they say, well, I'll get involved once I get more experience or once I get more deep in my job or once I get this or that. And I really need to have this before I can really get involved and make a difference. But so you can sit in the locker room and game plan all day, but at some point you got to step out in the field and play the game. And the way you get better is playing the game. You'll find out what you don't have when you're out there playing the game, not sitting in the locker room. So just get out there and play the game and don't worry so much about, am I ready? You'll find out if you're ready if you get out on the field, and then you'll find out pretty quickly what you need to do to get better.
I'm not sure how best you'll handle this question because while it was a short presentation, I'm still not sure the nature of your work. But I work in IT, and my team now is fully remote. So my question to you is, how have you adapted, evolved as a servant leader in a remote world?
Mike, I can appreciate that question because I work 100% remote and in the leadership development department as well. And I think that one of the things that I said, and this is not a whole like advocate Aurora thing, but one of the things that I said about my job was that I have never been in an organization working 100% remote that has built a culture that it has and allows me to still feel so welcomed, so valued remotely. And it is your we aren't able to stop by each other's office and have those conversations like we used to before. But it is those intangible moments in the midst of our meetings where we are intentional about sending kudos and shouting out individuals, recognition, ensuring that you have support. And that looks different depending upon your role or what IT or, depending upon the department that you're in. But I think the intentionality has to be there, especially in a remote environment, because you can feel isolated. You're sitting at home in your office all day by yourself. I'm on hundreds of meetings a week, not a day, but hundreds of meetings a week. And so that can be a lot. But I really think that our leadership team has modeled for me what it is to do for the rest of our colleagues in supporting them. Even when listening, we schedule weekly calls with our teammates. I'm not their leader, they're not my leader, but for 30 minutes a week, I have a call with them just to connect. Talk about whatever, my daughter, their kids, holiday plans, building relationship, listening to them, building empathy for things that may be occurring, figuring out even for service. We said, hey, some of you are in Wisconsin, some of you are in Illinois. What's a service opportunity that we can get together in our prospective regions and gather together? So there are a ton of opportunities to still build community remotely. I'm an advocate for it.
I've really struggled with the change to remote because I don't want to be a micromanager. And I feel like in a remote environment, it's really easy to feel that way when you're checking in a lot. So trying to reframe, kind of like Keisha said, I would do bi-weekly one-on-ones with some of my team members instead of framing it as, what are you doing? Because I genuinely don't know. You have a role that I have no insight into what you're doing. As how was the last week of work go for you? What challenges did you run into? Is there anything I can help you with? And framing it more as a discussion than like a structured check-in. I think they're also more comfortable conversations, but I've found with my team, we're a hybrid team, so it is a little different, but I have one teammate who's mostly remote and works evenings and weekends because he's in schools most of the time. And I have days where I feel like I have no clue what's going on. And my coach recommended to me just, have a candid conversation instead of framing it in as like a structured, what are you doing with your time? And that's helped a lot in listening again to what they have to say.
Theoretically, you can do anything remote. Like right now, I have an issue. I have someone in Sarasota and they're going through a hard time, a manager, and I really need to check in with them and say, how are things going? And not just, did you get it done yet? Or, you can still say, how are things going? How are you feeling? So I think from that kind of thing, you can still do things remotely, but I have a little more building affinity. I can't say that I've gotten a really good relationship with somebody that I didn't know remotely. So it's a challenge,
And I'm going to ask each table to share one thing that they discussed that was profound, just the most amazing thing ever. That's what we want to hear.
All right, so one of the things that we discussed was how you have to play into your own individual strengths to kind of make servant leadership your own thing, to kind of have the self-awareness of where you're starting from, what you're good at, and to expand and also, again, play for your natural strengths.
Okay, so at this table, we stuck with the don't complain theory. When you're actually serving and you're using your skill set to serve and do things for a purpose, you won't have time to complain and you'll just go out there and do some good things with you and your team and everybody that you work with.
Build community where you are planted, right? So if that's your family or in your convent or wherever you reside, focus on community there.
Leadership is how you think and how you behave. And that really resonated with the topics that we were talking about, emphasized today, the listening and the empathy. We love the metaphor of the moccasins as well, but making sure that we're actually taking time to slip on that other person's moccasins, not prejudge before we listen, seek first to understand before we're understood.
As servant leaders, how do we inspire and encourage others to become servant leaders, and hence building that community of servant leadership? And I think one of the things, very simple, ask people. Invite people to be involved, whatever it is you might be involved in. Sometimes that's just what people are looking for, so they can feel that sense of belonging. And then also leading by example and hoping that those who work closely with us and are side by side with us will be inspired to lead through our example.
I will bring up one. Thanks, Jean. So we talked about how, and I think this came from John who spoke. Thank you, panelists. It was awesome. But just how you need to start small. So it's going to be a big problem, and there's lots of them for us to solve as leaders, but to really break it down and just solve it one small piece at a time, and that's how you can build your house. Right, John? Yes, thank you.
So one of the things that stood out to us was servant leadership is a way of thinking about leadership, and there's a lot of examples given about empathy, awareness, being committed to the growth and what you can do there. I just want to add that it's important that your actions also have to validate your words. If your actions don't support that, those words aren't going to mean very much. And it's not what you do occasionally that matters, but it's what you do consistently that matters.
Around community, that it's a long play. We build the house brick by brick. It's a collective effort, incremental improvements, and over time will become a transformational change.
Is coming out of COVID, we were kind of coming out of an isolationist period, and I think some of that servant leadership got kind of caught up in that same time frame when we were kind of alone. And I think as we come back out of that, to remember to have grace as we see people and encounter people, and much like we talked about with walking in the moccasins, and to make sure we remember to go back and do that again.
The one main point involves 2 points that we, from our panelists, was the importance of listening and empowerment.
We know that servant leadership works, and we can encourage other people to be involved in it. And the way that we could do that is by providing the tools to make people successful. So by us leading by example and providing tools to others, then it could bring others in.
So it's a culmination of everything that everyone has talked about. It's a cumulative process. Success follows. It is something that appears counterintuitive. You give others, you give it away, it comes back, and success follows. This is not a hoarding match. The more you hold on to it, the less you will have, the less everyone else around you has. So if you truly want success, then you be the role model and you give it away and you show them how to do it.
We talked about assuming positive intent from everybody we work with, and that it's easier to build community when you all start from that place versus, I think we were using the example of war. It got pretty intense discussion-wise, but talking about coming from a place of positive intent. I'll bring it back.
Yeah, the intent here is to give you an overview of the world in servant leadership, the U.S., and locally. And locally means Wisconsin. This originally started with a Wisconsin effort to provide an example in the world how in a state or a region you can be running that. There are 9 city organizations. They're all informal. You met some of the people in the greater Milwaukee area. For instance, Jean and Kim are servant leader chairs in the roundtables. There's 11 of those each month. At the institution level, sometimes they take 2 months off in the summertime, but other than that, it's all year long. And here's a list of them. There is servant leadership going on in companies and beyond that in institutions. We have 200 plus videos. And Sean made many of them that synthesizes all of the things that you just heard here. You will see once this is approved by the presenters, it then goes on the website. And some of it is in little vignettes, others is, and you can use it for teaching. You can just, some people say you start looking at these and you just can't stop, and it gets into the late evening. We had an International Servant Leader Summit here in 2021, I think it was. And from that, we had a boot-up meeting from all the people in Wisconsin that were there. We're given about 30 of them were given an opportunity that showed some real hard interest. And that group developed a situation analysis, each individually with a lot of information we gave them about what's going on in our state. Everything we do has feedback, so that's synthesized. And from that, in about 4 hours, we put together this plan, believe it or not. It was a lot of preparation, a lot of input, and synthesizing. And from that, everybody signed up for portions of this. The 1 year is substantially done or been cast aside. The 1 to 3 years, some of those have been done, some of them aren't working. And the 3 to 5 years that's what we're working on right now. And we're doing it mainly through word of mouth and social media. So here are the sites. They're all in your handout. Here's La Crosse. They almost have a little bit of an ad of sort. It's everything they do in servant leadership. And there is a heavy content there in servant leadership. Fond du Lac. So the state of the world in servant leadership. In 0.5 seconds, servant leader gets 117 million articles, books, and discussions. Serve by leading, or lead by serving, gets 723 million hits in 0.29 seconds. Applied ethics gets 242 million articles and hit. We kind of keep track of this every 6 months. Everything is growing. The world is interested in this. In fact, the world would say, this is what we need. This is what we need. Here are all the websites. Greenleaf, the U.S. is on top of that list. They send out a morning message. It's just a one-liner from Greenleaf, usually. Really good just to look at and focus. There's going to be a meeting. The Greenleaf Center has what they call Greenleaf Scholars. These scholars are pre- and post-PhD students. And they write a paper. It's vetted by, I think there's somebody in England, maybe in Australia, and the other vetters are in the United States. And 4 to 6 are selected. They produce a paper each year, another group. There's 40 of them. These 40, plus some other people that you're looking at right here, Jim Lemoyne, Leiden, are some of the gurus in research. And there's enough research out there that they're doing research on their research. But 2024, 10/25 through 10/27, that's a weekend, there will be a meeting of these folks, and people from Wisconsin are invited that would fall into that category to get together to exchange information. This has not been done before. So this is the college world. And there's a history of this. There's a paper on our Wisconsin website that delineates this. I'll abbreviate it. 1970, somebody wrote a paper and said, or wrote an article or a pamphlet and said, Washington, you guys are in trouble, and suggested that they start getting more values into what they're doing. And they implied the kinds of things made a servant leadership. Later than that time, Greenleaf came out with a book, and Greenleaf was a fellow that graduated from a Midwest college, and when he graduated, he said, what should I do? They said, go to work for the largest company in the world and see what you can do about changing their culture, and that they're more than just about making money. So he went to work for AT&T at the time, started digging holes. He ended up being the director of research for organizational behavior and motivation of people. And there were 400 PhDs. That's all they did was think and write about that. He retired early, went home, and spent the rest of his life writing material about servant leadership. And the first one was The Servant Leader. And that would be, and now it's a book, but there's also a condensed version. Those are all available on the, Amazon has all that stuff. There's lots and lots of it. There's a publisher in Wisconsin, up in La Crosse, who is publishing books by people in Wisconsin that are writing about this. And you can find that on that website as well. So these folks are coming together to exchange information. That 1970 thing came up with somebody in 1980 that said, I think this is the solution. And then a lady came along about 10 years No, then came a fellow that wrote a book just for universities. And he said, leadership is nothing about morals and character. It's all about charisma. And that stayed in the institutions of our society to some degree, but that's what they used for 35 years. And then this fellow Lemoyne and about 4 of his contemporaries produced a paper, it's also available on our website, compared all the different types of leadership, and clearly it was about community, lifting up, bringing the heart and the head together, awakening the heart. These are my interpretations of it. And it is true. Many people already have this natural inclination. It's a matter of waking it up, associating and networking it. It's like growing oak trees. You don't go out and do it today and tomorrow. It grows, and it's rich and meaningful. And I will tell you that in my life, I'm 87, I think, that it is rich, rich, rich stuff. And you look back on it and you say, how did I ever get here? But thank you, I'm there. So I encourage all of you to consider this. Every noble life leaves its fiber interwoven forever in the work of the world.